Hello CC families. I'm going to go over chart A and the different ways that we learned in class to remember all the pieces of chart A. You can choose to do it however you want, but these are the ways that are familiar to me, and this is how I presented it in class. So we're going to start at the top with our 4 sentence structures. We did simple, compound, complex, compound, complex, simple, compound, complex, compound, complex. We're going to move down to the 4 purposes. So our 4 sentence purposes are declarative, exclamatory, interrogative, imperative. Declarative, exclamatory, interrogative, imperative. When we did the 7 sentence patterns, we learned it to the tune of 3 blind mice. So that goes like this. S-V-I, S-V-T-D-O, S-V-L-P-N, S-V-L-P-A, S-V-T-I-O-D-O, S-V-T-D-O-O-C-N, S-V-T-D-O-O-C-A, S-V-T-D-O-O-C-A. And then we can take those sentences, those example sentences, and we can put those into the same tune. So that goes like this. Jesus wept, Jesus loves me, Jesus is God, Jesus is holy, Jesus made me a crown, Jesus calls himself master, Jesus calls himself holy, Jesus calls himself holy. So next we have our 8 parts of speech, and I don't have anything pretty up here to help us remember it like all of my other little visuals, but we have a little chant to remember it to. 8 parts of speech, 8 parts of speech, woo! 8 parts of speech, 8 parts of speech. Noun, pronoun, verb, adverb, conjunction, interjection, preposition, adjective. 8 parts of speech, 8 parts of speech, woo! 8 parts of speech, 8 parts of speech. Noun, pronoun, verb, adverb, conjunction, interjection, preposition, adjective. And then the last thing on here are the 5 things that every sentence has to have. So I had students hold up their hand in front of them so that they're looking at the back of their hand. And think about a sentence. And the way we read a sentence, we start at the beginning. So every sentence has to start with a capital letter. It has to end with an end mark. It has a subject and a verb, and it makes complete sense. So every sentence has to start with a capital letter, end with an end mark. It has a subject and a verb, and it makes complete sense. So that was the memory work, like all compressed. I'm going to go back and quickly talk about the images and kind of explain what they mean. So we have, for our simple structure, we have a basic house. That house can stand all by itself. It could be on farmland, it could be in the city, it could be in your neighborhood. It's just a basic house. And so a simple sentence has a subject and a verb and can stand all on its own. And so we just are representing it with a simple basic house. And when we do our hand motions, we have a single fist in front of us because it's just one, it's simple. When we move to compound, now we have 2 houses that are the same. They could be independent, but they are connected by a fanboy's fence. And so they are joined together so that when we do our hand motions, we have simple and then compound, because now we've put 2 together to make it compound. And the other thing that you hear there is compound, and we are pounding one fist into the other. So that's another way to kind of pull those 2 together. Our complex sentence, there is a balcony on that simple sentence. And so if you think about it, you can't have a balcony without a house. You have to have the house first, and then you put a balcony on it. You don't just see a balcony floating around someplace. So that balcony depends on the rest of the house. And when we get to complex sentences, we will learn that what makes it complex is that it has a dependent clause that can't stand all by itself. It has to join with an independent clause. And then finally, we have our compound complex. Oh, and I forgot the complex. The complex motion we do is just complex. And the basic idea behind that is the sound of complex and flexing our muscles just to get that sound connected together there. And then finally we have compound, complex, and we're just putting it all together. So we have two independent houses that are joined together by that fanboy's fence. So those are our two independent clauses making a compound sentence. And then one of those independent clauses has that balcony on it that can't stand all by itself. It has to be connected to something else. And that is our dependent clause that makes it a compound, complex sentence. And that comes much later in the year, but that's just the general idea of why these images are what they are, just to help you remember them. And then obviously with our hand motions, we do compound, complex, and we just join all of those hand motions together, compound, complex. When we move on to our purposes, I've chosen images to help remind us of different jobs that are similar to the purposes our sentences can have. So, declarative. Declarative just means that the sentence is giving you information. It's just the facts. And the image I have here is of a woman giving you the weather. So when you're watching the news and the weather reporter is telling you the weather, he or she is just giving you the information. Declarative. We move down to exclamatory, and these sentences are said with emotion, and they will end with an exclamation mark. And who better to represent exclamatory sentences but cheerleaders, because their job is to get the fans all excited and cheering for their team. And they do that loudly and with lots of emotion. So they represent our exclamatory sentences. When we move down to the interrogative sentences, we have a detective, and he has his magnifying glass. And that helps us remember that interrogative sentences are sentences that are asking questions. Just like a detective has to ask questions to figure out the puzzle or the crime or whatever it is that he's investigating. And then finally, we have our imperative sentences. And here we have a drill sergeant, and he's telling you what to do. And imperative sentences are commands. So that image of a drill sergeant goes along well with imperative sentences. The thing to keep in mind is that even a polite command is still an imperative sentence. So if I ask you to please do something, then I'm still giving you a polite command, but it still is imperative. Please put away your dishes. So those are the reasons why I chose these different images to help us remember the things on chart A. We have our structures represented by houses. We have our purposes represented by the jobs that people do. And we have mice representing our patterns because we sing Three Blind Mice. I don't have anything for 8 parts of speech. Sorry, I haven't been creative enough to come up with anything. And then we have the hand for the 5 parts of the sentence. So I hope that helps you to be able to remember all the things that go on chart A as you move forward through this year and try to commit it to memory.